Hello, good morning. Uh, I take this opportunity to congratulate all the colleagues and friends attending this program on this 71st Law Day. Congratulations to everyone. My thanks are due to Professor C.P. Singh, the Dean, Faculty of Law, Lucknow University, and his team of organizers for inviting me to share some of my views on this very auspicious day. Friends, I shall be talking about fundamental duties and a responsible citizenry. The idea is that for the purpose of nurturing a responsible citizenry, uh, fundamental duties is something which is so vital. Before I start talking about fundamental duties, the first regret that I would like to express is that Constitution for this or that reason has become a book of law students alone. My understanding is that this is a book that should be a compulsory reading for all the citizens, and especially the chapter on fundamental duties, which is so vital, as I said, for the purpose of nurturing a responsible citizenry. Friends, basically, there are two reasons why the fundamental duties are so important under the scheme of Indian Constitution. This is really unfortunate that we did not really emphasize on this idea for so long, never celebrated law days. I recall some 5-10 years back, celebration of law day was a rarity. In fact, very few people would know that 26th November is law day, which is so special for Indian citizens because it is that day that we actually adopted this constitution, adopted, enacted, and gave to us as this constitution. One thing that we need to appreciate and understand is that there have been limitations with the democratic process that we had during last 70 years or so in our post-independence phase. But nevertheless, the kind of achievements that we have to our credit as Indian citizens is something that I say with a lot of belief and faith, has been something about which every single Indian can be legitimately proud of. So, be proud of our constitution, be proud of our democracy, and do remember to celebrate this 26th day. Friends, there are basically two reasons why fundamental duties are so important. First is a jurisprudential reason. Those who have studied a bit of Hohfeld might recall the right duty paradigm that he represents in his table of jural opposites and correlatives. I would not like to really get into the technicalities of Hohfeld's classification of right duty paradigm, but talking about it from a common mass standpoint, this basically would mean that all kinds of claims that we have are actually the form of duties, or one could say that all rights are in the form of claims, whereas the uh, duties are all in the form of obligations. Now, this is something very simple that uh, any kind of a claim without an obligation actually doesn't stand. It doesn't have a lag on which it can naturally stand. That is the case with rights and duties as well. To begin with, when we commenced our constitutional process in 1950s, we only had rights in the constitution in the form of part 3 of the Indian constitution. There were no fundamental duties as such, which came roughly 25 years later. But try to appreciate this, that without a person holding a duty towards you, your claim of a right is just not possible. It's something which is a sort of what we call in Hindi is an anadhikar chesta. So you have to have somebody who owes a duty towards you, which makes your right meaningful. Similarly, I might have a duty towards somebody who has a right, and that right gets substantiated because a corresponding duty is owed by somebody. Your duty is my right. My right is actually your duty. That's how the right duty paradigm really stands. And that's how we need to appreciate and understand it in its right sense of the term. Therefore, after fundamental duties chapter was added into the constitution, it has made the constitution really a balanced document from the point of view of right duty relationship, from the point of view of a responsible citizenry which doesn't only claim its own rights but also has a spirit to perform its duty when somebody else's right is in question. So the inclusion of fundamental duties chapter in Indian constitution has simply made it a more balanced document. This is one. The second reason why the duty element is necessary for a responsible citizenry is because without an element of duty, the life of a community is simply not possible. Dr. Radhakrishnan writes about it, and I would quote it from him, that duty is the sum total of my karma in a community. This is how he expresses the element of duty. My existence in a community is actually due to the kind of duties I owe to the community. Writing further, Dr. Radhakrishnan says that duties are really the opportunities offered to man to sink his separate self and grow into the world. Meaning thereby that my separatedness from the community actually gets sunk into the community only because of the element of duty. So I get sunk into the identity of that community and grow into that community as an individual, obtain a new kind of a personality, a new meaning of my life. That's how duty is to be understood. In fact, if you put it this way, that without an element of duty, the life of a community is simply not possible. It will not be far from the mark. Friends, have a look at the list of duties that fundamental duties chapter has at the moment. 10 duties we had in the beginning when we had this chapter in 1975-76, and then we have added one more when 21A, that is right to education, was added in part 3 of the constitution as a sort of fundamental right, and a corresponding duty of parents included in fundamental duties chapter. Just have a look at those 10 primary duties that constitution talked about, or these duties were added into the constitution later. Abiding by the constitution and its ideals, cherishing the noble ideals of the founding fathers that actually inspired them for the freedom struggle, protect the sovereignty of the country, defend the country, promote harmony amongst people of all kinds, value and preserve our own rich heritage. You might recall that the new education policy that has been brought into being very recently talks extensively about preserving this rich heritage that we had, which somehow was not discussed for a very, very long time. For whatever reasons, we don't get into that, but we need to appreciate and understand the effort that the current system is making in rather making the rich heritage relevant, as new education policy puts it, making this rich heritage relevant and vibrant so that we can cherish our own ideals and our rich heritage. So the fundamental duties chapter talks about values and preserve the rich heritage that we had. Also talks about developing a scientific temper and a scientific spirit, talks about safeguarding public property, also talks about striving towards excellence in all spheres of life, of individual or all collectivity. You talk about any single duty and look at the way Dr. Radhakrishnan talks about the element of duty being an important element for the life of a community. In fact, these 6 dimensions are an essential part of what would constitute duty, as Dr. Radhakrishnan is talking about. This is about the current state of the constitution. I talked about the values and the rich heritage that we had. Friends, I will just go back and quickly, before I conclude my talk on why these fundamental duties are important for our responsible citizenry, I'll just give a few examples from that rich heritage. Friends, you know Bhagavad Gita is supposed to be one simplified version of a very complex philosophical system that we had in Ved, Upanishads, or whatever you name. But that complexity of philosophical thoughts is put in the very simplified format for a common man in Bhagavad Gita. Now, Bhagavad Gita also talks about duty almost in the similar sense of the term, and in fact vouches that a meaningful and responsible citizen is possible only when he performs duty towards the community. Now, why do we perform a certain duty or a karma for that purpose? Lord Krishna talks about in chapter 3. I had taken a few slokas from chapter 3 and will quote some of them. So, slok 5 of chapter 3, wherein Lord Krishna talks about that everything under this sun, in this universe, is something which is working consistently. And he talks about it in this way: Nahi kaschik kshanamapi jatu tisthatya akarma krit karyate hyavasah karmah sarvah prakritir jai gune. Meaning thereby that none in this world is ever standing static, is sitting silent even for a moment. Nahi kaschik kshanamapi jatu tisthatya akarma krit. Not even a single thing is standing still, is actually sitting is silent. Everyone is doing some or the other thing every second for that purpose. Because he says, Karyate hyavasah karmah sarvah prakriti jaiguni. Almost every single element in this nature, almost forced by its nature, is engaged in some karma. Therefore, even when you are sitting, some karma is happening. It could be a karma, vikarma, or akarma, or whatever you call it. And there are other classifications of karma as well. But karma is getting happened. So when the karma is getting happened every single minute, why don't we make it meaningful? This is how Lord Krishna talks about. And then what kind of a karma it should be? Should it be a karma which is just irrelevant, which is neither useful for me or the community? He talks about it. You will have to appreciate. In another slok of chapter 3 itself, I just, cite the slok and then explain the point. He says, Yagyarthat karmano netra lokoyam karma bandhana tadartha karma konteya mukta sangha samachara. The expression yagya is not actually used for a set of rituals, religious rituals. Rather, it actually talks about a certain cycle of duty. So you have a certain duty which you need to perform. So something that you do out of a sense of duty is something which doesn't bind you with this world, is in fact a liberating experience. And this is something which every one of us can feel when you do something good in the form of a duty towards somebody without expectation of a corresponding work from that side or from that individual. You see, the amount of divine pleasure that you have is something tremendous. So it doesn't become a binding karma, it actually becomes a liberating experience. Therefore, the karma has to be done with a sense of purpose, with a sense of, you see, what we call detachment. You see, as Gita talks about, in a way, you see, like nivrit hoke karma mein pravritt hona. This is how Gita would talk about that. Then, you see, in another shlok, shlok 22, in which Lord Krishna further explains this point, and I'll take a minute or so in explaining that point as well. He says, Name parthaste kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana nan vaptam avaptavyam varta evacha karma. He says that in this world, in all the three lok that we had, there is nothing which is aprapya for me, which I cannot get. Everything is available to me. I can get everything at the immediate instance. I can get everything. But nevertheless, I keep on doing my karma. So why do I do my karma? Lord Krishna explains it. And here comes the question of duty. He says in another shlok, Yadyadacharati sreshtaha tattad deve tarojanaha yat pramanam sakurte lokas tadan vartate. Meaning thereby, karma is happening, he has explained all the time. Karma keeps on happening. And everybody is engaged in the form of a karma happening around him. He voluntarily makes it meaningful by engaging himself meaningfully in doing that karma, which is his duty basically. So therefore, everybody is doing his karma. But he says, the expression used is srestha. Yadyada charati srestha. One who stands, Satwalekar explains this, one who stands in the capacity of a leader. He also works, he also performs his karma like any other person. But one who stands in the capacity of a leader performs his karma with, you see, yat pramanam sakurte loka sadan vartate, with an intention to create a praman, so that it is, you see, it acts like a precedent for others to follow. That is the way the element of duty has to be performed. So and you see, leader is not somebody who is always leading the whole nation or a particular community. All of us at one or the other point of time stand in the capacity of a leader. So say for example, an elder sister, an elder brother, a father, a mother, they are always leader in some way to somebody. So every one of us has, you see, at one point or the other, he stands in the capacity of a leader. And he has to present an example to be followed by the flock, by his, you see, those who pursue him, those who look towards him, right, for an example. So when we perform our duty with that sense of commitment towards the nation, towards the community, then we nurture a system, you see, which becomes part of everybody's heritage. It is in this sense that, you see, that when we do our karma and our duty, the fundamental duty as is talked about in our rich heritage and in our constitution, the current constitution that we have, then we constitute a socio-political system in which all of us would take pride to be part of it. All of us cherish and nurture to be part of this community, larger community, and will actually nourish and cultivate this composite culture of which the constitution is talking about at more than one place. Look at one of the directives, though it is the directive about Hindi language. You see, Article 351, if I am not wrong, which talks about that Hindi shall be developed in the form of a language, you see, which shall become the vehicle of the expression of composite culture of India. Please understand this. This is not something that has come today. It was there in the original constitution from the very beginning. This is precisely what we are talking about today in the form of our national education policy as well. Friends, I believe that this obligation to perform my duty is what my constitution demands from me, and this is precisely what I would like to convey today on this auspicious day of 71st Law Day for this country. Thank you so much for patiently listening me. I would conclude my talk here. Thank you so much once again. I once again put on record my sincere gratitude and thanks for the organizers who invited me to share some of my views on fundamental duties and a responsible citizenry. Thank you so much.